All right. All right.
Woo! How about that?
That was wild, Ty. That was unexpected.
Yeah. Yeah. So Michigan, what? 7.5 point favorite
Mm-hmm.
going into the first of two playoff semifinals. This one in the Verbo Fiesta Bowl.
Yes.
And it seemed as if they were playing tight, at least early, before the game really opened up in the second half, which, by the way, had a total of 69 points.
Oh, nice. Nice.
But TCU jumps out to a quick lead. They're able to hold that lead against all odds down the stretch amid some anomalies. Let's say maybe we could talk about some of it. But 51-45 is your final score. Congratulations, TCU, moving on to the College Football Playoff National Championship. The second game is actually going on as we speak, so we'll find out in a few hours whether it's going to be Ohio State or Georgia. But I think as playoff games go, this is a pretty big upset.
It was a pretty big upset and a classic because we don't really have these types of back and forths. Traditionally speaking, if you go by the numbers, we don't have these types of back and forths, great games. Now, great games is a subjective term that sometimes can mean a balance of offense and defense playing to their capabilities, or it can mean weird bad calls, weird busted plays, weird double pick sixes that were out of the ordinary. I saw Bill Connolly, our friend Bill C from ESPN, mentioning that as for turnover luck or passes defended luck, that JJ McCarthy threw fewer interceptions than the numbers of passes defended would suggest that he would. But yes, look, there were the two pick sixes, the games that changed the trajectory of the win, if that's an acceptable phrase, were obviously those pick sixes. Obviously, the number of plays, the busted play where TCU was a DeMarcado ran for the long touchdown with a failed blitz from Michigan that Michigan was not able to get home. And look, that's one of the many secret sauces of successful playoff teams is the ability to get after the passer with as few guys as possible, which was Michigan's secret sauce last year. We talked about that earlier this year, that when you don't have that kind of star power coming off of the edge, it changes what you're able to or not able to do on defense. And even the Michigan interceptions off of drops and tipped passes were crazy and random. And at the end of the day, look, it'd be easy to say, look, the difference was the non-Michigan touchdown call. But look, one of the many highlighted themes in this game was Michigan's inability to capitalize with opportunities in the first half and at various points in the second half. And the other theme on the other side is, TCU won and lost this game a number of times and was the team better prepared to win this game when it came down and close and went to a slugfest in which, what was it, 8 touchdowns or 11 touchdowns or whatever it was. I think it was 8 touchdowns in 8 minutes or something like that of game time. And so TCU, maybe not definitively the better team, but the better team today, which seems to be all that matters.
Well, and, I'm glad you bring up sort of the chaotic finish to this game because TCU's been in a bunch of them this season. Both teams have been battle tested to varying extents, but TCU has been in some of these knife fights before. And so you could feel the tenor of the game changing the deeper we got into it. Of course, there was that first half. We talked at halftime wondering what the hell's going on here with Michigan. What is the deal with this team? And then in the second half, it seems as if, all right, TCU's defense, we know the story of the offense. It's a quick strike offense. They rely on the big play. The defense was on the field for the majority of the third quarter, and it felt like they were starting to wear down. And it was just a matter of, all right, are they going to hang on? Are they going to be able to hang on? Of course, Michigan has a shot down the stretch to try and win this thing and fell a little bit short. Maybe we can talk about the way that game ended. For those of you that are watching across a number of different platforms, whether it's YouTube, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, we even fired up the old Twitch stream here, Dan, just because it's such a regal event, not just being a playoff game, but also New Year's freaking Eve. I hate that, but alas, here we are. Make sure you hit follow. Make sure you hit subscribe. Make sure you drop a comment as you are watching along at home. We'll flash some of those up on the screen here before we.
By the way, Ohio State just scored for what it's
Ohio
worth.
State just scored. Okay, so
According
we're doing
to people
this.
In the comments, we have shout out to Gammy Gang. Ohio State strikes first. Touchdown nuts, according to David. Aaron, of course, Alpha Verballer. Buckeyes strike first. So it looks like Marvin Harrison Jr. touchdown.
Okay,
so,
big surprise. Big surprise.
This is going to be a video that people are going to watch as a replay, and they'll know much more about this game than what we're talking about. But we're here to talk about Michigan TCU.
We're here to talk about Michigan TCU. So look,
yes.
I've got a couple of the stats here that I will just put them up on the screen now just to kind of recap where things stand.
Yeah.
You can make a very strong case that the quarterbacks were the story in this game. The quarterback being Max Duggan, right? Runner-up in the Heisman, got it done, had some mistakes, of course. That's been sort of the story of Max Duggan's career. But at the same time, made some big plays, especially with his legs, was able to help propel his team to victory. Quentin Johnston, look, we've talked about Quentin Johnston all year. I mean, the stutter step he put on the Michigan defender down the stretch and broke free for a touchdown was just artful. That's why he's going to be a very high draft pick come April or May, whenever they do the NFL draft now. On the flip side of things, on the Michigan side, it really was the story of J.J. McCarthy. J.J. McCarthy threw 2 pick sixes. J.J. McCarthy, I think, tried to will his team back into it. So it was really...
By the way, not freak pick sixes.
No.
That were 100% on him. He threw the first one late to the field side and got jumped on by a very good TCU defensive back who it was a great catch and great run, and then completely did not see D. Winters stepping into a passing lane. So it wasn't tipped. It wasn't a miscommunication. They were both seemingly on J.J. McCarthy.
Yeah, D. Winters, by the way, who I didn't know what all to put on the slide here to kind of highlight the game that he had, but a pretty good game for D. Winters. He was a game breaker in a sense from the defensive side of the ball for the Horned Frogs. But the story here, I think, on the Michigan side, outside of the stats, and of course we've got some impressive ones here as I kind of flip it back to you and I.
Yeah.
It was the missed opportunities that you mentioned before, right? It wasn't just the 2 pick sixes. It was the story, at least early on, of being inside the 5-yard line, trying the Philly special first drive of the game that didn't work. There were other instances where they had opportunities to score. They settled for field goals. So, of course, you're going to play it back. You're going to rewind it, and you're going to say, well, if a few of those mistakes, if a few of those red zone trips go in a different direction, perhaps we're talking about this game in a much different light. I think if I were a Michigan fan, that's exactly how I would approach it. That's exactly what I would be posting on message boards about, right down to the very last second. Even though they got a crack at this thing late, not calling the timeouts. There were like some really confusing decisions on the Michigan side that, again, kudos to them for getting here, for playing as well as they did, for fighting back despite being down a lot. But ultimately, it was fitting in the sense that it was the mistakes that got them.
Yes. I think if there's anything I'm coming away from in this game, because when you have a 51-45 game, there are a number of reasons for a number of those scores or whatever lack thereof. The thing that I come away with as the most important reason this game was what it was the TCU front.
Yeah.
The announcers made reference to J.J. McCarthy calling it a smash fest if TCU really is going to just show that 3-3-5 look. The 3-3-5 name of the defense is quite misleading, because what it does is it's not 3 down linemen and only having 3 guys on the line of scrimmage. It's a defense that allows you to play around with who is up front.
Much more of a hybrid approach, right? It depends on your personnel.
Approach, using a lot of speed, not unlike what the best of the Gary Patterson defenses did with the 4-2-5 approach with a lot of hybrid players. But what we knew about this game coming in was TCU's defense at times was a liability. And that was much more earlier on in the season. And they took a number of steps forward in the back half of the season, I think punctuated by that Texas win. But also, we knew what Michigan was going to try to do. We knew the identity of Michigan, that they were slowly going to wear teams down. Headline is, and this is my best Michael Scott voice where he does like a 500-word headline, is TCU's defense completely dictated this game. That they confused J.J. McCarthy, obviously, that they harangued J.J. McCarthy, obviously, and sure, Michigan may have been and probably would have been, or almost assuredly would have been, more dangerous with Blake Corum. Maybe TCU would have been more dangerous with Kendre Miller, who left in the middle of this game. But the fact is, Michigan's offensive line, the much heralded offensive line, it was a big deal, the Joe Moore award-winning offensive line, they got pushed around and they got beaten on one-on-one attacks by the TCU defensive front, who was a unit that we didn't think was going to be a strength in this game, Michigan's offensive line would be.
And I'm glad you brought this up, because as I mentioned to you before we did the stream, I've got a New Year's party going on downstairs.
Please. And I was boring 3.5-year-old. We all have our stuff.
I was boring some of the guests by showing them some of the stats that would, at least before the game, would have indicated that TCU's defensive front, the pressure rates were low. What they do in the red zone, right? Their ability to hold a team from scoring once they are pinned back deep. All of these stats were below average. They're in the red. Yeah. So the fact that they played as well as they did, that they confused Michigan as much as they did up front, that to me is something that I don't think anybody could have seen coming. Now, part of that started to wear down the deeper we got into the game. As the defense got tired, especially towards the end of the third quarter, you started to see that break down a little bit. They weren't quite as effective. Michigan was scoring in like 25 seconds, right? Mm-hmm. But I think for the lion's share of the game, we saw a TCU defense that was much better than advertised.
Oh, absolutely. And you know what? Okay, so I think to the victors go the spoils, and I just want to put the spoils on TCU. Aside from the defense itself, obviously the defensive backs came to play, and they actually, I forget who, I wish I had the name at the tip of my tongue, but I am fried by the end of the year, is you had the one TCU corner, I believe, say that Michigan hasn't dealt with speed like TCU's. The way the corners close some of those passes, probably right. TCU, Joe Gillespie, obviously the first-year defensive coordinator who came down from Tulsa, did a masterful job, I thought. And that's, a little weird saying it when you give up 45, but given what the first half looked like, the game plan for how to harass Michigan. I also think it also comes down to, and this is obviously more Michigan side, we use the term winter wonders, right? When you have to game plan a defense around specific receivers or multifaceted running backs, right? That when you have players like Devontae Smith, or you have players like the Clemson receivers that they've had, or like Christian McCaffrey, guys like that, we're like, what the hell are we going to do with this specific receiver in the open field? Michigan, as good as Ronnie Bell, Ronnie Wilson, those guys, they do not put the fear of death or the fear of life into the hearts of the TCU coaching staff, like guys we've seen at other schools. Marvin Harrison Jr., for instance, it qualifies as that. So that to me is an advantage that I think TCU had coming in. And I thought Quentin Johnston certainly acquitted himself with the attention that Michigan had to pay to him all over the field as a winter wonder, right? That he can take a short pass and turn it long. And anytime he is running that go route, anytime he is running that deep post, Michigan guys are freaking out about what to do about it and putting attention onto him. So that was a difference maker to me. And it's just, honestly, it's nothing new for Michigan in the red zone and with scoring opportunities. We saw it against Michigan State. We saw it against Illinois. We saw it with field goals right before the half. Oh, a 59-yard field goal at it's not an offense. It's not a coaching staff that was prepared to adjust and prepared with Excelsior. My term for like, this is our package, right? Yeah. Going with the Philly special early. I appreciate swings, and look, if it works, then it's good, right? It's a results-oriented business, but it doesn't seem like that's Michigan's identity, right? The sort of, here's our time to trickerate the playoff game.
Yeah, and I mean, teams try that, right, in the postseason, typically in meaningless exhibition games. We've seen a lot of that so far this bowl season, but some of the play calling in crunch time was curious on the Michigan side of things. The other thing that you and I discussed a little bit off air was the way that Michigan's offense has worked all year has been largely because of the threat of the run, because of the success of the run that has opened up the pass downfield, because of the success of the run that has changed the way that defenses have to scheme around this offensive line. Like, it really just impacts a lot. When that, like, obviously there was the big play right out of the chute, 54 yards up the middle, that seemingly at that time, way back when, set the tone. But that wasn't really the case. It wasn't like Michigan dominated on the ground the way that we're used to seeing. And I was curious to see as the game unfolded how that would impact the game plan. Now, J.J. McCarthy, albeit 2 pick sixes, I thought acquitted himself fairly well.
He bounced back super impressively, right?
Yeah,
throwing those deep balls, making plays with his feet, absolutely.
So at least on that side of things, even though it didn't ultimately work out and advance Michigan through to the championship, just as a fan, somebody who's watched these games very closely, that was interesting to me. It was interesting to me to see what's going to happen if you need JJ McCarthy to throw it 34, 35 odd times, however many times he threw it, and also win on the ground. What is he going to be able to do that in a big moment? We've talked about that ad nauseum this season. JJ McCarthy in high leverage moments. What are we going to get? Because we haven't seen a whole lot of that. So despite the turnovers and despite some of the mistakes and whatever happened at the end there with the snap, who knows whose fault that was, but I thought he acquitted himself pretty well, and he shouldn't hang his head at all. He did everything he could. In the end, it was really a track meet. It was a track meet. It was not converting on a couple key opportunities. Of course, the pick sixes come back to bite you all the time in a big game. But, at least on that side of things, I thought JJ did pretty well for himself. Got a bunch of comments coming in. We'll flip a couple of those up on the screen. I think our plan is to talk after the Ohio State Georgia game as well.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So we'll be back
up on it. And I've got the YouTube TV library all set.
So I
can speed through this at the beginning that I'm missing. I'm the only other closing thought, the big picture is, how many ways does Michigan have, as they're built currently, to win a big game? They're built to beat Ohio State. They're built to beat Penn State, but they're more familiar with those coaches, that personnel, and TCU offered a lot more mystery. And TCU came into this game with nothing to lose. Absolutely nothing to lose. They were going to be the looser team no matter what. I was disappointed that after the first quarter, Michigan didn't try to adjust to a more wide open attack, testing TCU deeper in the open field, that they saved that for the second half. Ultimately, it's the first half that doomed Michigan, and ultimately it's TCU's preparedness and ability to take advantage of mistakes that won them the game. So it's, TCU was ready to win in multiple ways. And I don't think Michigan was, at least in that first quarter and a half.
They seemed like they were on the back foot a little bit there early. Yeah. We texted about it, right? They just seemed tight. They weren't themselves early. They seemed a little bit out of sync. TCU's been in these situations before, and I'll do credit to them. 51-45 is your final. Let me flash a few comments here up on the screen. This is a good one from Andy saying something we didn't mention at all here, but Blake Corum, right? A notable absentee as part of this showing. Not having Blake Corum was a big deal for Michigan. That was one fewer playmaker that they had out there that could have helped them win. He's obviously been very, very important to the success of this team so far. So I don't think it can be overstated how much Blake Corum meant to this team. Maybe we didn't need to see it down the stretch in order for Michigan to get here, but in a big game in a high leverage spot, you want your best players on the field. So it sucks that he wasn't out there. It sucks that he wasn't out there. Here's one from Joshua, Dan. I wanted to talk about this. We'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the oddities of what transpired down the stretch. So first and foremost, just to paint the picture of what's going on, it's fourth down. Michigan needs to get a first down. Otherwise, the game is over. The ball is prematurely snapped. It bounces off of JJ McCarthy, and it's like a mad dash to try and get the ball. First off, I don't know how that wasn't a forward pass. I don't know how there weren't penalties called, because none of that stuff seemed legal. Whatever took place with the laterals and the flipping around, I get why Michigan would try it. Right. You got to do what you got to do. It did not seem like that part was legal. It also did not seem like the seeming targeting at the end was legal as well, because that felt like targeting. So just kind of like a whole mishmash of really weird stuff to conclude a really weird football game. Was that targeting to you?
Sure. But if I'm a Michigan fan, I don't even think about that play. I don't even think about that play because Michigan has opportunities throughout that first half. I'd be more upset about the touchdown that wasn't counted. But again, Michigan had the opportunity from the 1 yard line to punch it in. And we get JJ McCarthy with the bad handoff, or the bad exchange, however you want to call it, to the, was it a converted linebacker fullback situation that ends up in a TCU fumble recovery and touchback. And then we have that final play, JJ McCarthy struggling with the snap. We've seen it before. We saw it last year, I believe, right? In the Michigan State game, the exchange issue with JJ McCarthy in the game. So we have the snap issue with JJ McCarthy and the center. And so if you're going to say that was targeting and it was not called and it should have been, you are right. But also, who cares at that point? right? That it's a game that if it comes down to that one play and you need the referees to say in this miracle needing moment that they should have called targeting on this play that was, fucked from the start.
Yeah.
Like, that's nothing. It's unfortunate is as deep a word that I can use for not
fair enough.
Not getting that call. Yeah.
Here's a comment from Twitch about Harbaugh having issues with bowl games. Our friend Nicole Auerbach from The Athletic tweeted out shortly after the result here. Nicole, a Michigan person herself, Michigan grad. Michigan has not won a bowl game since Jim Harbaugh's first season in 2015 and 2016. His teams don't play well after the long layoff. I think that goes without saying in light of that stat, but sort of a disappointing way to go out here. I feel for Michigan fans, it's tough to be in this spot again and to see it unfold, but they did come back. The comeback was fun. The comeback was fun.
Here, my closing thought is this. Holy hell, TCU. I'm sorry. Their greatest coach of all time slowly fades as a winning coach. They come to the conclusion near the end of last season. All right, we're done here, right? This has gone on long enough. The defense was the worst in college football. I think it was something like 129th. And for the players that they'd recruited on that side of the ball, obviously unacceptable. They hire Sonny Dykes from SMU. They lose a number of players to the portal.
Sonny Dykes, by the way, Sonny Dykes, who in the preseason, and I have the quote somewhere on my computer, somewhere in our Google Doc repository. Sonny Dykes, who said that it's going to take me 18 months just to get to a point where the program feels stable. Maybe not quite 18 months, given a situation like TCU, which I've said time and again, it's all the same guys from last season. The same guys, which
not even the same guys because they lost a bunch of good guys.
Well, they lost a bunch of good guys.
The highest rated signee in TCU history, Zach Evans, who transfers to Ole Miss. Yeah.
But it's a lot of the same guys, right? It's mostly the same core guys. So the fact that Sonny Dykes could come in, it helps to have that veteran leadership, sure, granted. Yeah. But he could come in, assemble mostly the same parts in such a more successful way, I think is a huge credit to him. I mean, it makes the move away from Gary Patterson obviously a lot more easier to bear. They went, undefeated until the Big 12 championship.
And it's felt like, and I know this isn't the reality of the situation, but like TCU's been a 7-ish win program for the past 6 years or so, right? That maybe they're up to 8, maybe they're down to 5, whatever. And for them to make a leap like this, that wasn't the conclusion of like this generational class coming in and building and portaling and getting transfers in. And like, this is what they've been working. This hasn't been what they've been working towards. This is a complete nothing burger of a year, just in terms of how they finished last year. And like, oh, they're winning close games. Oh, Max Duggan coming in as the backup, and he was the starter forever. And Kendre Miller is emerging, and Quentin Johnston continues to be Quentin Johnston. And DeMarcado's getting plays. And all of a sudden, you're like, are they 10-0? What? And everybody keeps thinking to themselves, TCU's kind of fool's gold.
We did it.
We totally did.
We did it all year. Yeah.
And we treated, committee treated, putting them behind Tennessee when they did, like, cute story, guys. Cute story frogs. CSF.
Yeah.
You put 50 on this Michigan defense. They're not a cute story. They're the
good
story.
They're good. Well, look, 51-45 again, a crazy game. Yeah. A lot of points in the second half, 69 to be exact.
Yep.
And we will see what the future holds for TCU. We will find out shortly who they will be playing in the College Football Playoff National Championship game on January the 9th. By the way, if you're coming out to the LA National Championship game, solidverballive.com. We're going to be live in LA on Saturday the 7th at the Troubadour, doing a live show talking about all sorts of college football stuff. It'll be fun. Come on out, solidverballive.com. If you're a TCU fan and you're going to be in the area. But congrats to the Frogs. They will no doubt be an underdog regardless of who they play in that game, but I don't think it really matters at this point for them. They're already playing with house money to some extent, and I guess we'll find out in due time how long this incredible roller coaster goes on.
38 on the defense, by the way. Andy corrects, and he's absolutely correct because of the 2 pick sixes, of course. To put 50 on Michigan overall is pretty crazy. And also, I'll leave you with this, Ty. One of the 2 teams playing for the College Football Playoff National Championship barely beat Kansas. Barely
there you go.
Kansas.
Kansas is just a stiff breeze away from
ending this run, essentially.
From ending this run. The other thing of note, and why don't we leave the fine folks with this, Dan?
Yeah.
TCU, not just the story of the college football season in many respects, the first team from the great state of Texas to actually make a college football playoff. Not Texas, not Texas A&M, not
First
Baylor.
Big 12 team to win a playoff game.
First Big 12 team to win a playoff game, not Oklahoma.
Nope.
It's Sonny Dykes, it's TCU in a magical first season. So why don't we leave it there? We'll be back at some point after the Ohio State-Georgia game. But thank you all for watching. Hope you'll come back a little bit later. For those of you who are watching this thing after the fact, leave us comments. Make sure you hit follow. Make sure you hit subscribe. We'd love to have you in our Verballerhood, Dan. Stay solid.
Peace.